Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Um, I want to do book review, and it's not often I do this. I've occasionally done film reviews, but I think it's very rare that I do book reviews. This isn't actually so much a review about the prose and the writing and how good it is, that sort of thing, more about the subject of the writing. And the book is entitled Ocean Devil, The Life and Legend of George Hogg by James MacManus. It's the book. Just hold that nice and close, so take a screenshot if you wish. Now, it's about this young man. He actually looks a bit older than he is. He died aged only 30 back in 1945. And just a little bit of an introduction. George Hogg was a young Englishman from Harpenden, Hertfordshire. He came from quite a prosperous middle class family. And he filled a lot into his young life. Basically, he spent time as a freelance journalist, although how much is actually attributed to him or not is a matter of some debate. But it is thought, and McManus does argue, that he contributed to the Manchester Guardian whilst, as it was then known, whilst he was in China in the 1930s and 40s. Obviously, a very eventful time to be in the Far East, uh, in the midst of the Second Sino-Japanese War. He moved around the big cities, but the big focus of his life was his work with dozens of orphan boys in the north of China. Now, I started reading this when I was over there myself the second time around in 2018. I've just finished it tonight. I'm a very slow reader because I'm reading lots of other books at the same time. But one thing that struck me was there's some parallels with the story of Gladys Aylward. If you're not familiar with her, she was an English missionary who worked in China in the 30s and also in wartime, so quite the same period. And not too far away, actually, she was in Shanxi province. Hogg was in Gansu province, so not too far from one another. Although the work was somewhat different, he wasn't in a missionary capacity, she was. Um, Also, Hogg was associated with the New Zealand communist Rene Ali. It's very important to put this in context now. I am deeply, deeply critical of Chinese communism. I think it's caused enormous misery. But it is important not to judge 1930s communists or communist sympathizers too harshly because this was in a context of a period where there was, the world was guided by ideological forces. And to be fair, a lot of the communists at that time, Western communists, couldn't have seen the totalitarianism that was going to come. Now, Rene Ali is one of the very few Westerners to have been a member of the Chinese Communist Party. He died in his 90s. He's still kind of revered in New Zealand as a bridge between West and East, but some would say he was a sellout. Now, Hogg died in 1945. So, and he was never ideological, he was never a communist. Ironically, during the Cultural Revolution, his grave was vandalized because he was deemed to be a counter revolutionary. But ironically, whilst he was active, it was the nationalists under Chiang Kai shek that accused Hogg and others of being sympathetic to the communists. So, China at that time, was incredibly sectarian, and often people were accused of being on one side or the other when they were apolitical or innocent. And there were atrocities committed by both sides during the very costly Chinese Civil War, both before and during World War II and after. So Hogg, being a Westerner, was primed for this, and yet, much like Gladys Aylward, he overcame local suspicions on many occasions, defying stereotypes. For instance, there was perceptions that, oh, he's a wealthy foreigner, so he's going to be not used to our ways. He could sometimes be stubborn. He could sometimes have a certain priggishness that you got with wealthier. He wasn't upper class, but he had a certain priggishness, and I think it's fair to look at someone's whole biography that sometimes could come across as a little bit of you know knowing better than the locals, but his personal courage is undeniable. I mean, imagine being a young guy, young Western guy in wartime China, having to take on this massive burden, learning the language, wartime conditions, taking on the responsibility of dozens of orphan boys with behavioral problems, a lot of them, severe health issues, lice, severe poverty. It's no small thing. And then trekking through the mountains with equipment, moving school to school, being the headmaster of that school, instilling discipline. On one occasion, for example, he had to expel a teacher who was found to be stealing from the school's budget because he wanted to be a musician, and the man begged with him not to be released, but Hogg had to put his foot down. All of this from a guy who at the time was 27. Now, for me personally, that's the age I was when I first went to China, but I was just a teacher. I didn't do what George Hogg done, and I can't but respect the guy. Um, yeah. Um, Front cover is somewhat, well, I was going to say misleading, not necessarily. It shows George Hogg. I assume this is a KMT officer based on the uniform, and then, of course, Imperial Japan in the background. I'm not sure if it's the best picture, but I'll just show you some pictures inside. This is some of his old boys. No, old men. That's 2007. So these guys were his adopted sons. Um, this is bust of him. It's actually the actor Jonathan Rhys Meyers who played him in a film called The Children of Huang Shi, 2008. I haven't seen the movie, so I can't comment much on it. There was some artistic license. For example, it implied that he witnessed the rape of Nanking. He didn't, not directly, although he did witness wartime bombings such as that in Chongqing and elsewhere, I believe. That's some of his adult son and his girlfriend. This was restored in the 2000s or the 1990s. It had been vandalized during the Cultural Revolution. But remarkable life for a young guy. So it's a very readable book. It's not extensively long. It's under 300 pages, and this is the introduction at the back. How was it that the memory of a young Englishman who died in a distant province of China in 1945 brought tears to the eyes of a group of elderly Chinese in Beijing in the spring of 2007? It's an inspiring story. Hogg wasn't perfect. Like I say, he could be priggish. He could sometimes be quite flippant in that 1940s way, almost like people were almost desensitized to suffering. I mean, the letters he wrote back to his parents sometimes were a bit flippant. Oh, saw another bombing today, lots of bodies on the street. By the way, how is the weather? Things like this, it was kind of that stiff upper lip. He very much was that stoic Englishman in that sense. But you know, it's always inspiring people who have colorful lives like that, and I can understand why his story was turned into a movie. I haven't seen it though. Anyway, check it out if you can, or check out the movie. I'm certainly going to do that. The bust, like I say, is of the actor Jonathan Rhys Meyers. They should have got one more like the likeness of George Hogg. Rhys Meyers looks a little bit like him, not exactly, but might be a good movie. I don't know. Some other family pictures from life in Hertfordshire. He came from quite a privileged background, so it's a good example of someone going outside their comfort zone. Many do not. I mean, there must have been times when he wanted to give up, but he never did. Anyway, that's the book Ocean Devil. That was a nickname. There was still a lot of jingoism in China at that time towards foreigners. Still memories of European colonialism and so on. Yeah, check out if you can. And it's one of those people who should be well known, who deserve recognition. George Hogg. Okay, check it out.